We got a full group tonight, and ready to go.
Yeah, they didn't punch it out.
That's what I was thinking.
My son. Only 2,000.
So that recorded going?
But I get
I'm not, I'm not complaining.
There's lots of jumpers and,
It's an old gun.
there's so many considerations.
Sounds like a project that's can continue to rise. But they're soon. Not a continuous. They like the visitor center down there. Oh, 7 seconds. Yeah, that's good. You did. Fair warning. Thank you.
Oh, I see.
Ready, action.
Okay. I'm gonna bring the city council meeting to order for April 16th, 2018. Thank you for showing up, everybody. Appreciate it. And let's do roll call, please.
And Director, Councilor Westover. Here. Councilor Warren.
Here.
Councilor Baker.
Here.
Councilor Snyder.
Present.
Councilor Shunk.
Here.
Councilor Cameron. And Mayor Lett.
Here. Pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have our liaisons here from the high school. Priscilla or Gabriel here this evening. We're gonna pass on the high school liaison section of our meeting here. And we're gonna move into public comments. These are comments about things that are not on the agenda. A lot of you are here to speak about the road diet. Or someone wants to speak about something not on the agenda, you can do it now. I think Sharon, you want to speak about B-City?
Sure. I just wanted to tell you that the city has done quite a few interesting things this year. I'm Sharon Schmidt and the 4601 South Pacific Highway, and that's one bright light.
Yeah.
Is there a cover for it?
On top, there should be a cover.
There you go.
How's that? Pretty good.
It's our interrogation.
Where are we doing today? Let me pass these for you. Terry.
Well, thank you.
This is gonna get up. These are close.
I think the 3 minutes, Sharon.
I brought items for show and tell. If you plant a pollinator garden, you'll get one of these awesome signs. And what we mean is that we're out to save the bees. So we hope that you'll participate and think about maybe planting something pollinator friendly. Get to see this?
Cool.
Pretty cool. It's a phoenix bee, just so you know.
Very best.
Okay, so this year, we started out the year by bringing in Anthony Militopoulos, PhD from Oregon State University. We did a pollinator camp with kids and adults. Irrigation was installed in the B-City USA Phoenix Pollinator Garden, located at Blue Heron. Where's Ray? He's our hero. Yay! We also designed and produced our sign. Phoenix worked with elementary students at Phoenix Elementary School to repair and replant the pollinator beds. We did some education and outreach. We were at Phoenix Dog Days, we were at the Phoenix Easter egg hunt, we were at the Bear Creek cleanup, and we were at Kids and Creeks. And Big Bunny there is, my buddy. Okay, Obesity USA, started this amazing mural, which is going to be the biggest pollinator mural in the United States. So have y'all seen it? It's by Exit 24, and it's in the shops. So please go by and take a look. And the paint was donated by Phoenix residents. So we're pretty excited about those things. Wanted to mention them, and thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All I've got to say.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak about something not on the agenda? Okay, very good. We're gonna move on to the consent agenda. A couple things on the consent agenda this evening. A couple sets of minutes, one from April 2nd, one from April 10th. Anybody want to pull anything from the consent agenda for discussion? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I was just gonna say, I wasn't listed as being present for that meeting, so I don't know for the April 10th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You weren't at the meeting?
I was.
You wasn't?
Yes.
Right.
Okay, I will make that correction.
Okay, thanks. Any more discussion? Okay. Is there any motion?
And then approval of the consent agenda.
Second. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is a discussion regarding Phoenix Plaza Park designation. We have a new, kind of a new park and whole park going in down by the Phoenix Plaza building in downtown Phoenix. And discussion's been had regarding naming that park and officially naming a park and making it an official park, but I guess it's part of the comprehensive plan also, that park area. And Dave's gonna speak, says we, about that issue, and we're gonna talk about whether we have to actually name the park by resolution.
Well, I can bring Evan up if I can. This arose from the discussion that you and I had, officially designating the plaza next to the new Civic Center building as a park. And Evan's research has found that that property is already designated as a park in the comprehensive plan. That's how you go about designating land as park land, is put it in the comp plan. So, Evan.
There's not really that much to say beyond that. If we wanted to take a final step, I would say that the next time we amend our comprehensive plan map, we could formally designate that on the map as a park. But really beyond that, I think we've got it covered in the Parks Master Plan. So name away. It's park. But if you wanted to formalize the boundary of the park as separate from the plaza, you might do that, but I don't think that's even necessary.
At one point, we talked about having to have a resolution to name it a park. Do you guys think we should have an official resolution to name it a particular park and put it in the record for future reference? And I say that in the context of the fact that we can, as a city, use marijuana tax revenue to help fund park facilities.
There's no guidance in the city code that I'm aware of as to how you name a park. So, could do a resolution? Sure. Someone could just make a motion right now. You know, I move to name it the Plaza Park. And if it passes, that's its name. So again, it's really the council's call as to what type of official action you would like to take to give a name to that park. I suppose a resolution is easier to research, but I also think that if we put a big sign out in front that has the name of the park on it, probably it's not going to change for very long.
Proclamation.
Proclamation.
Now, does it, as it's designated right now, can we use the marijuana tax revenue for support of that area, or do we have to make it an official, change the designation of it?
Well, again, as Evan just said, that the way you designate land as a park is you put it in your comp plan, and it's already in the comp plan.
So we're good.
I will tell you that certainly in terms of next year's budget, I'm going to recommend that you use 100% of your marijuana tax money to pay debt service on the new police station.
Gotcha.
So, and any money that you use to maintain the new park is gonna come just from general fund.
Just thinking down the road.
I would suggest that in order to pick a name, we have the Parks and Recreation Commission. Think about the great name for it.
I like to throw it out to the kids at the high school and have contest. For the best.
But have you heard about the whole thing where, you know, Bodie McBoatface became the name?
Cracky McFarface.
Just saying,
We make a new.
run some risks there.
You might be able to establish a process that we should be doing things. So
Yeah.
You know, a lottery or a, or you could use the Parks Department. I think there's really a set standard, but certainly you can be creative in how you can name what you can accept.
I thought before the one name it Phoenix Plaza and Phoenix Plaza Park next to the Plaza Building or Civic Center. Thought the whole plaza and the Plaza Park, the building, and maybe the area in back, the wetlands, Plaza Wetlands. So I think the Plaza Park would kind of fit the whole area, but up to you guys. That's how you want to go about this. We can just agendize this for another time and talk about naming it. If the guy sits, we could throw it out there now and name it.
I know for agenda.
You want to agendize it?
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
That's fine. What's on the future agenda? We'll name the park if you're allowed to name it. That's fine. Right. Right now. Thanks, guys. Next up on the agenda is the Main Street lane configuration. And we're gonna have a presentation by staff, citizen comments. We're gonna talk to council about the item. Or Dave, you wanna
Now, I'm
kick things off?
gonna introduce this item, then I'll turn it over to Evan and Ray. So I guess the first thing is just to review how we got here. Obviously, Main Street, Highway 99 used to be 2 lanes. It also used to be the state's jurisdiction, not the city's. There was a jurisdictional transfer that I believe was done in 2015. It basically means that the state transferred to the city jurisdiction over what happened with that stretch of road. It means that we can decide on the lane configuration and also on the speed limit and other amenities that go along the roadway. And there was a decision made, I think it was a recommendation from Pura, but there was a decision made in the fall of 2015 to restripe the road as 1 lane with parking on both sides and a bicycle lane. There were no planning commission or city council approvals required, and as far as we can tell, of course, I wasn't here, Evan wasn't here, Ray wasn't here, but as far as we can tell, there were no approvals required because the striping was temporary. It was sold to the council as a test of how well 1 lane would work. And the idea, consistent with the city center plan, was to try to slow down traffic, to create a more inviting pedestrian atmosphere downtown, and also make it safer for bicycles as they move through downtown. The council in late 2016 began discussing reverting the configuration to 2 lanes. It was mostly in response to feedback that councilors were getting from the public who were complaining about the queues to turn from the side streets onto Main Street being too long, or at least certainly longer than they had been when Main Street was 2 lanes. And I think you're aware that in his winter newsletter, the mayor solicited public feedback, and he reported back to the council that the feedback was overwhelmingly in favor of returning to 2 lanes. In the spring of 2017, council discussed this issue at one of the meetings and directed staff to come back to you with options for different lane configurations on Main Street. And Ray and Evan came back to you in September of 2017, and at that time, the council reviewed the options and requested that staff hold a public open house so the public could see the options. That open house was held in October 2017. About 30 people showed up for it. Ray and Evan report that the feedback at that open house was primarily in favor of 2 lanes. So there is money in next year's budget to overlay Main Street. That's a project that's been in planning stages for a long time. And obviously, if we're going to overlay the street, it's going to have to be restriped. So that would be the time to either stick with the current configuration or go to a different configuration of some kind. One thing that I would want to point out is in our review of the transportation systems plan, the question has arisen, does TSP require that Main Street be 1 lane? The answer is no. But neither does the TSP require that Main Street be 2 lanes. The TSP is actually silent on this question. What the TSP does say is that if you're going to do 1 lane, the street has to meet certain standards. Or if you're going to do 2 lanes, the street has to meet certain standards. But it doesn't say the street has to be one or the other. The problem is, and Evan and Ray can explain this much better than I can, is that nothing that we could do in terms of lane configuration on Main Street will meet the standards that are in the transportation systems plan. I was talking to Sarah earlier today. I hope she doesn't mind me repeating this. I said, I don't know why somebody didn't go out there with a tape measure before they wrote that table for the transportation systems plan and see that none of this would fit within the right-of-way that's available out there. But that's the situation that we have. So regardless of what configuration the council ultimately selects, it will have to go back to the planning commission for a variance. It's the same thing we just went through with North Church Street. As we explained when we were discussing North Church Street, it is a variance. The code does not provide for a conditional use permit. So it will go to the planning commission for a variance. So what I'd like to do at this point is just turn it over to Evan and Ray, and they will review the various alignments that we think could work out there, cost implications, and the approval implications.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Evan McKenzie, Planning Director. What we have for you tonight is essentially a slightly reduced version of the presentation that you saw previously and at the open house. Some of the options that were discussed that clearly did not have favor have been taken off. So we can hopefully move through this a little quicker. So again, you've seen all this before. This is the area that we're looking at. It is what we call the couplet, basically where it splits into 2 one-way sections. There is a transition area on the north that is right by the Phoenix Auto Center, where you can see the sidewalks stop. On the south, same thing, where the sidewalks stop, that's roughly where the city improvements stop, and in some way, somehow, no matter what we do, we're going to have to transition to what lies beyond. This is what we're working with. We have a right-of-way that is not consistent with curb width the whole way through north to south, which means we are constrained by the narrowest section. The narrowest curb-to-curb width is about 42 feet. So any option we do has to fit basically within 42 feet. Some blocks are wider, and so some of the options will essentially have leftover space. Same thing, just looking at the 42 feet. This is the preferred alternative from the 2015 City Center Master Plan. There are a few X's on here. Note that these were options that were dropped. for this street behind or in between Main Street and Bear Creek. So other than that, this is the basis for pretty much everything we have in the city's transportation system plan, which is an element of the comprehensive plan. This is what led to the majority of the project recommendations included in the transportation system plan. This is the preferred alternative that came out of that effort. Now, mind you, this shows that preferred alternative constructed. They did not construct that alternative, they simply added paint, and that is why we have such a wide street with only one lane. Here we are. Lots of paint on the road. The idea behind this was to create a more pedestrian-friendly environment and to slow traffic. Paint does neither of those things because it doesn't reinforce the outcome. So this is something that was not in the presentation last time, but this was added hopefully just to provide some background on how and why we design roads the way we do. Roads have design vehicles, basically the type of vehicle they're designed to serve. Most roads have to fit trucks. And to take an example of a very common privately owned vehicle, I just used the current Ford F-150. 7 feet 2 inches wide, a semi-truck is 8.5 feet wide, and then the standards for a bicyclist, you've got about 3 feet of width, 5 feet of a clear zone is required, and then the ORS language is kind of odd in how it interprets the minimum safe distance to pass. It actually assumes that the bicycle rider has fallen over and is lying in the road. And that is the minimum safe distance to pass. So that works out to however tall you are lying across the road. Not exactly the most definitive measurement, but that's what we have to run with. So this does get a little busy. This is what got built, and you can see here that we have leftover area where we've got the buffered bike lane. We have, very wide parking stalls of about 10 feet, which is much wider than you need, and a 14-foot travel lane, which is also significantly wider than you need. This is what the transportation system plan calls for. So if we were to build something basically without going to the planning commission, go straight to a contract to design and build, this is what we would build.
Evan, isn't it now, it says 12 feet, but the transportation system updated a few months back. Should the 12 feet be 11 feet?
So the 11-foot minimum width is for local streets, although I think we may have amended that for arterials as well. So the table was amended when we adopted that into the development code. I will also mention that when you have parked vehicles next to a bike lane, there, although the standard in the code says 6 feet, if you have parked vehicles next to that 6 feet in an 8-foot travel lane, not a 6-foot travel lane, you can go down to 5 feet for the bike lane. Now these diagrams are to scale, not necessarily for height, but they are for width, and the assumption is that the car that's parked on the right side of the street is about 6 inches from the curb. Not everybody's that good, but most people can get that close. And that leaves ample room for pretty much everything that we would want to fit onto it. This is another option that came out of the previous discussion. 11-foot travel lanes, 5.5-foot bike lane, single 8-foot parking lane. This would get us 2 lanes of travel and the bike lane all in acceptable widths. And then what we would do is basically, on those blocks that are narrow where we cannot park vehicles on both sides, we would fill that in. So we are assuming, where'd my cursor go? I don't know how well people can see this. We would assume that this area here would basically be extended out into the street with sidewalk, landscape, something to fill in that extra space. On the blocks where we have enough room for on-street parking, it would likely be retained. This is a third option. This basically brings everything down below minimum standards. including the parking lanes. Now, I don't know how good everybody here is with parallel parking. If you're not that good, your vehicle is going to either be out in the bike lane or it's going to be in a travel lane on the other side of the street. Dually trucks, anything wide, delivery vehicles, you're probably going to be well into the bike lane or the travel lane on the other side. So this option would get us to travel lanes, but if we were to maintain parking on both sides, it is very problematic. We have a constraint at the south end of the couplet. It is not insurmountable, but it is there. With the 26 feet that we've got between curbs, we would have to reconstruct most likely this little island here where the crosswalk is and make it smaller. So it's doable, just not with the existing curb width. That is all. We have some additional information, but I think mostly we'll just be here to answer questions if there are any from council regarding any questions or concerns that might come up from the public. It might be best to just try to address those when everything is done.
Like we did the Church Street.
Yes. And Ray, did I miss anything that you want to add?
Maybe back up one slide. At the south end, Ray Dean was probably Public Works Director. At the south end of the couplet, the 26-foot constraint, we'd actually probably take it off of the west side because the head crossing pole is further back from the curb line. We could probably sketch that, but like Evan said, it's not a huge issue construction dollar-wise or construction management-wise. Also in our staff report, we did put in a dollar amount for the upcoming fiscal year for the work. It's not just for Main Street, it's also for the resurfacing and restriping of Bear Street. The financial allotment also includes the need for constructing bulb outs at our intersections, regardless of what program we come up with. We're gonna, I believe that it's incumbent upon us to improve the crosswalk conditions at all the intersecting locations along Main Street. That includes the striping, the signage. I would also add in there recommendations for rapid flashing beacons, primarily at 1st and 4th. And one other note about financial obligations, we do have a community block grant for a portion of the 4th Street work, the 4th Street connector between Main and Bear Creek, that we are good through 2021 on that grant.
About 60 grand, so not chunk changes.
It's 73 from the block grant and 27 city match. So it's actually a pretty good match ratio there for us. So we would either do it in conjunction with this or immediately after.
Can you go back to there's an option that you guys, if it's 2 lanes, there's an option that you prefer, or staff prefers. Can you just go back to that?
So this one
Thank you.
gives basically adequate room for all of the features. It's okay to combine elements below the minimum, well, it's okay to do single elements below the minimum width. It's really not advisable to do multiple elements below the minimum width because then you've got people jockeying for space at speed, along with parked vehicles and anybody else who might be trying to occupy that space.
And from a technical perspective, just to clarify this graphic, the reason we used a 6-foot landscape strip, the landscape and sidewalk furniture strip, and kept the bike lane at 5.5 feet rather than 6 feet, is that this is primarily the section of roadway between 4th and 1st on the east side of Main Street, and you already have bulb outs there that are constructed to 6 feet. So the idea would be to just extend point to point on the bulb outs and not have to reconstruct the return radiuses on those existing islands. Certainly we could shave it back another 6 inches and put a more compliant 6-foot bike lane in there, but it would require somewhat more construction of the existing bulb outs. But that's how that was envisioned.
I've got a few questions, and council, if you want to be recognized to ask questions, just raise your hand, recognizing you ask questions also. But we're just 5.5 feet in red. It's actually, the minimum is 5 feet, right? So it says it's in red, but by our code, it can be 5 feet. So 5.5 feet is above where we have to be by code.
Yes, the minimum is 5, so, yes, the table specifies 6, but you can go down to 5 when you are adjacent to a row of parked vehicles, or a parking lane.
And we're at the 6-foot landscape, over to the left, so the east side would be landscaped 6 feet wide. Is it possible to put tables and chairs and like a little cafe environment outside along that strip of land?
I think it's preferable. You've got to be a little bit careful about your edge treatment as you get closer to travel lane, because you don't necessarily recommend too much pedestrian or sitting or street furniture directly adjacent to the travelway. But there are ways that certainly you can create more livable space along those business frontages and along the frontage of the new plaza building, and really look to draw out the interior design into the streetscape. And you know, the streetscape needs street furniture. There's no two ways about it.
It is generally preferable if you have like cafe seating on the sidewalk to have that behind a row of parked cars, because they certainly provide a level of safety. It's not required, but it's a good thing.
Okay. And the options, this one here versus 1 lane, is it less expensive for the city to do a 2-lane option, or less expensive to do a 1-lane option?
It really would be dependent upon the option that you choose for the 2-lane versus 1 lane. This option versus 1 lane, I think the costs would be very similar, because you'd be reconstructing one side of the sidewalk for several blocks, one side of the travelway for several blocks to create a playing area. When we go down to the single lane configuration, the real cost impacts in that scenario are going to be the 4-foot landscaping designs on each side, on both sides of the roadway. So you would have to reconstruct and hardscape those additional roadway edges to get it to be compliant with this graphic. So ultimately, I believe that the 1 lane with the expanded landscaping islands on both sides would likely be a little bit more expensive. And then, you know, there are also variations on this theme. You know, you could put the 8-foot landscaping on one side and maintain one curb line if that was your desire. You could keep the east side of the roadway consistent and expand out the west side with an 8-foot landscaped and, you know, streetscape area. It will perhaps present itself a little more awkwardly out in the field, you know, than things look on paper or look on our graphics here. But you also got to remember that for the bulk of the west side of Main Street, you've got an extensive amount of parking areas, driveways and penetrations, and not a whole lot of vertical view shed changes along that streetscape, especially south of First Street, where you have, quite frankly, a large open pavement area. So you could benefit that streetscape presentation by expanding all of the landscape area or furniture area or walking area, sidewalk expansion on one side of the roadway to save money in that regard.
If the goal, I'll just mention experience from a previous city. If the goal is to have more evening activity, you'd probably want that on the side that's going to get the evening shade. So have the wider sidewalk on the west side where eventually we will have buildings shading that area. It's not a requirement, but it can pay dividends.
One other construction cost implication of disturbing both curb lines is that you're going to have to reconstruct all of the drainage improvements on both sides of the roadway. It's a crown roadway, so you have gutter and curb gutter and drainage systems on both sides of the roadway. So manipulation of both edges of the roadway are going to require drainage improvements on both sides.
We know one more, and then I'm going to catch a mic with you, Terry. You know, I was up in Eugene recently, and there's a lot of right turn lanes. So if you're coming down going south on Main Street portion, coming towards Oak Street, it could be a right turn lane onto Oak Street and one lane just continuing south and going out towards the area of the bus stop. And that way we wouldn't have to amend the area that's already built to traffic island. And that configuration was all over Portland. It seems like a nice option for
The requirements for signage, striping, and control at that intersection is not gonna be much different than shaving off a couple of feet of curb line to make the two-lane configuration go straight through.
Okay.
There's pros and cons. I don't believe that the width restriction at the south end of the couplet is what I consider a considerable cost impact to the program.
Okay, cool. Mike, you wanted to go in and
Yeah, if you don't mind, what are you guys envisioning, if we're to, is eventually it's gonna have to merge to one at some point if the 99 is going to one lane eventually?
Correct.
Correct.
Southbound, yes.
Southbound,
Northbound, the plans are to stay 4 lanes, I believe.
That's correct.
And even if it does northbound, we're not looking to change the configuration on Bear Creek. So even if they did
Sure.
neck it down to one, we'd at least be consistent with that throughput.
yeah, so we're good there, there'd be a merge, like there is now going northbound. Southbound though, one of the constraints is the south couplet, right? So if there's 2 lanes, we'd have to merge down to one at
No,
the
that
south couplet or lose the bike lane?
No, I think if we put 2 lanes through to the end of our jurisdiction, where we marry up with ODOT's jurisdiction, we'd marry up to their 2-lane configuration today, and then it would be incumbent upon them to do the transition from 2 lanes to 1 and merge within their right of way.
So
And
after the
that they
couplet.
own. Yeah, I mean, it's a much straighter, cleaner shot. That should
Sure.
be a well-organized lane reduction area.
So 2 would go to 1 likely after the couplet, south of the
I
couplet.
mean, it's such a straight, clear shot with great visibility.
Sure.
No interior islands to work with in visibility and, cross traffic. So from my perspective, that would be a good location for them to transition down to 1.
Sure, but if we were 2 going into the couplet, we would have to lose the bike lane then, because it wouldn't fit? Is that what I got from the notes?
I don't think ORS would allow that.
I don't think that was one of our options that we.
No, it was just,
We can do it. We're not quite as, that's a curve that we're not necessarily constrained by, it's just there. So we would need to reconstruct. It's not like the curves on the outside of the street where you have your curb, your sidewalk, and then a building.
okay.
Terry?
Ray, you mentioned the added cost to redoing the curves.
Mm-hmm.
How does that compare with if we go with, say, this to, I know that you always show good wisdom when we're gonna, somebody says, oh, let's build this, let's build that, we also have to maintain it. And I'm just wondering what the maintenance cost of that over the next, however long we're gonna be there compares to the curb cost that we could avoid that way.
I actually think there's a balance point there because we'll have less asphalt to maintain, but we'll have more landscaping to maintain. So it's a trade-off. And since we own both Bear Creek and Main Street now, I think over time that balance point is not going to be that significant, quite frankly.
Okay.
Less asphalt is typically a good thing in the long run, but the landscaping packages, they take an awful lot of time and materials and effort as well.
Stuart?
So if we were to go to the option to make 2 lanes and basically, get rid of those parking stalls on the left side, my concern is that we're trying to develop the downtown couplet area, and then we want to maximize our parking. You say plus or minus 18 stalls. Are all those located within the area between 4th and 1st?
Yeah, that would be along that 4-block section. And the reason we feel like there's actually an opportunity there, I mean, we wouldn't recommend it typically because you're right. It's very atypical to put this type of improvement into a municipal streetscape improvement in a downtown, in a commercial area and remove parking. We do have the availability of a significant amount of off-street parking on that side of the roadway via not only the parking lot for the plaza, but also the parking that's back behind the clubhouse and envisioned for extending back out additional parking in that area to Fourth Street.
So do you think with losing those 18 stalls, when we get downtown actually developed and it becomes busy, do you think we're going to have adequate parking for down there to service all those potential businesses?
It's highly dependent upon the businesses you put in. The one advantage that you have is that a large portion of that block is going to be occupied by your Civic Center building. You know, so not a typical parking generator during regular business hours until you have an event or until you have an activity that goes on there. So
most cities that have traditional older downtowns that were built prior to everybody owning a car have abandoned their off-street parking requirements entirely because you would not be able to occupy a building if you had them. And we have not done that. We don't have the need yet. It's certainly something that we could consider in the future, but, and this is something that kind of, it's opposite thinking, but when, not if, but when we have more commercial activity downtown and we have people parking on the numbered streets as overflow, we will have succeeded, because that means that there is more demand than we have supply for, and that means that we've done something good. That is not a problem, that is a sign of success.
And one of the other issues associated with creating these downtown improvements is that we're trying to create bigger landscape areas, create bigger sidewalk areas, create better pedestrian crossing opportunities. We're including a significant amount of pavement for for the bike lane. That is to get the multimodal activity increased in the community. And so while the improvements do take away parking, they also provide additional support and capacity for multimodal transportation.
I just want to dovetail on your question. It's a good one regarding parking. There's one business which will be impacted by that. Angie Vermillion has a nail salon. That little tiny building in down in Pitcherland, and she knows that building is not long for its world. It's a month-to-month lease, and once the Civic Center is up, and it's going for sale, the first thing that's going to happen, that building is going to get torn down, and she understands that. But people do come up in front of her building and park there, but that building is not going to be there for long. The Essential Aromics building, it's the one with the solar panels on top. She has parking in the back, and the owner plans to build a parking lot in the back. She has parking in 4th Street also. When they come to Organical Bakery, there's only 2 people, the bakers, and they come there and they park in the back. And on Wednesday evening, 310 Main, the clubhouse does have events, and it's in the evening time, and there's plenty of parking available. And when all said and done, when everything is opened up, there'll be much more parking on that side of the road than before, even with those lanes gone. Parking businesses. I've heard that feedback for you. Hope it helps.
So then that parking lot behind the Civic Center, then, I mean, that will be reserved for public parking, right? We're not going to limit that to only Civic Center parking.
Yeah, I don't believe there will be any reservations on that parking.
So same with the road going around, right? So the road also, the road can also have parking on it, as well as a parking lot. It's wide enough, I think, for parking and driving, right?
Neither of us are sure.
And I can't conclusively say that. It's certainly not striped that way. If it were there, I mean, you'd want to look at the opportunity for creating a one-way travel pattern. I think that it's too tight for parking on one side.
For one way,
you can certainly revisit. But if we were to do it as a one-way loop, then you could get parking on one side.
And then we'd also open up the parking lot in back of 310. Like 14 parking spots there.
It's significant. I mean, when you look at what Evan was saying about the build out of older communities, it's typically building on top of building on top of building, and there is no back street parking. And those parking lots that are off of Main Street don't have any other facing commercial activities on them. So they're really space available in terms of daily commercial activity.
I'll go ahead and Sarah go first. Sure. Go ahead. She had a question.
I had a question. I wanted to thank Mike for asking that question about 99 South, which is going to one lane. I also had the same question. Do we know right now, so regardless of how that configuration, if we did go back to 2 lanes and then it would go down to 1 lane, Do we know what the speed limit would be? Would it change at all on the 99 southbound configuration?
I haven't heard from ODOT whether or not they've posted a desired speed limit on that, but
Yeah.
it would be consistent with that, with their concept of reducing the speeds and reducing the volumes.
Is it 40 right now beyond the local?
It's,
55.
oh no, further down it is. It transitions up as you get into
It's
the
35, 40, 45, 55.
Correct.
It really gets going.
Great, thanks for that. And then I had a second question just about, so in the configurations, there's the option 1, which is the TSP standard, and then there's also in here, which we don't really talk about, is the 2015 preferred alternative. Is that something, so that's what was originally envisioned, kind of the first go round. Is that something that we could still do? I noticed that that's not among the options, because it brings the sidewalks out, and that's not in the plan for the TSP.
I think we actually show this. If you flip through,
It's,
Oh,
but
okay, just
what
a
it's the 4-foot landscape on both sides. Go ahead into the.
TSP standard.
Go ahead, keep going.
Oh, gotcha. I'm sorry.
Keep
This
going.
is laid out weird on ours, so it says option 1 below, or it's cut off in your
It's
places.
the one that has
My
the
mistake.
6 foot on both sides. The reason the landscaping area, there you go, is a little bit smaller is because this cross-section width is not as wide and in these constrained points, that as it is on the balance of the roadway. So under this option 1, when you get a little bit further downstream, or when you get past south of First Street, you get a little bit wider than 4 foot on landscape because the cartway curb to curb is a little bit wider. And I think that more closely matches the original preferred alternative.
the only difference between this and this is that this has a 5-foot bike lane and the TSP says 6 feet. Otherwise, they're the same.
Yeah, and the landscape areas will vary because of the varying curb to curb width.
So yes,
Back down to
these
4.
areas are
And then it'll
basically
move back out to 6.
whatever's left. So it's not necessarily mandated that they're 6 feet, and in fact, they could be 3 on one side and 9 on the other.
That's where the give is in the landscape.
Correct.
Thank you.
I do want to open up to audience questions, but sure, go ahead.
In the pantheon of vehicles that you use to model this, you have the 18-wheeler and pickup truck. Where does the fire truck, the large fire truck, fit into that? Do you know what the width is on that?
Pretty close to the 18-wheeler.
Because I noticed in non-emergency conditions, they sometimes drive it into downtown and go to one of the Mexican restaurants for lunch. And
The smaller rig or the bigger rig?
the big, they have to stay with their equipment in case of emergencies.
Okay, Mike.
I got one more. If you guys would go back to the satellite view of the 2015 preferred alternative, that one there. One interesting thing I noticed there is behind the 99, kind of east of the 99, there was a new internal roadway kind of laid down there. Is any of that still feasible? Because I could see that adding parking spaces.
Yeah. Ed had mentioned the large red X's are areas that are not included in the discussion tonight. One of the critical ones was the extension of Second out to Bear Creek. That's not going to be feasible because of the wetlands that are in the area. It's going to be cost prohibitive to
Way too expensive.
really make that thing. It's probably a bridge connection, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I was thinking not so much the east-west roads, but just that kind of spur loop almost that goes behind it.
Yeah, the reason these were excluded out of here is that we can't guarantee that they'll go in.
Gotcha.
Can these go in? This chunk between Second and First and east of Main Street, primarily Pure-controlled property or other vacant property. If there was a redevelopment in this area, we'd certainly look to do that type of connectivity.
Talking right here.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
This block right here.
Okay.
Between Second and First. You know, you could, as Evan had said, you could maintain requirement for this essentially becomes off-street parking for commercial activity.
Gotcha. Yeah.
You know, so you could do that there. The other properties are privately owned and a conglomeration of a lot of different owners, so it would require an awful lot of cooperation or a wholesale redevelopment of the blocks further south to get that to go. There isn't as much value in that, in my mind, because of the termination point where you get a cul-de-sac out there. Then you're using an awful lot of property that's very, very valuable downtown city center development area for real estate that turns into paving.
Yeah.
The other issue they've got is there are wetlands in the area. We do have a significant slope differential between the midpoint of Second to First.
Sure.
So, you lose a little bit more of your efficiency with the roadway and the parking because of those physical limitations.
I was just thinking about it, not going all the way down to the cul-de-sac at the end, but just doing a loop across a few streets to get, if you could put additional businesses back there or something. I was just thinking about if we lose parking, we've got some offset parking, but I was seeing if there were any creative ways to add more extra parking.
South of First, we're not losing the parking. Remember that, right? So south of First, we're not losing the streetscape parking per se, because we've got a wider curb-to-curb section. It's really between First and Fourth, and as Evan had said, the development potential between Second and First could include something in that area.
Gotcha. Thank you.
It's only 3 blocks.
Yeah.
Something else to consider is the fact that though you'd be gaining parking, that could have a pretty significant negative impact on what you could do with the land to actually build on it, and so your improvement value above the land would probably be greatly reduced. I'm not saying one option is preferred over the other, but that would be the trade-off.
Yep. It always, like I said, when you're in the downtown commercial core area, the installation of roadway infrastructure and parking always takes away from your development.
I was just wondering, because it's tough to get buildings back there now, I was wondering if that would add an additional layer of buildings. We could do that. With the wetlands, that's a constraint.
Well, we're gonna move on to Stuart.
Just one question. One thing that's been brought to me from various folks is the number of curb cuts that exist along Main Street. Can you talk a little bit about, regardless of which plan we pick, what will happen with those curb cuts?
Less is better.
Less is better. We'll look at individual lot by lot and even combine adjacencies for minimizing the number of curb cuts, probably particularly south of First Street. It's a problem. They're also privately owned entities, so we can't force the issue necessarily, but I think in the spirit of cooperation, the spirit of trying to create a streetscape that's appropriate for the commercial uses we envision here, that we'll be looking to get some cooperation on that front.
So we're gonna open up for public comments, and then we're gonna bring back staff for comments that might be out there. And I also we're here for the Church Street discussion. A couple weeks ago, we did a really great job with the council regarding the Church Street issue, and I hope that we do as well on this issue of the Church Street. And I'll just say it again, the council will listen to citizens and come to a compromise decision that works for almost everyone. I had a couple emails that people wanted me to read into the record, and we'll take public comment, but staff can come back. There's one by Lynn Cohen. I'm going to put this into the record. It's more like recommendations on what we should do if we do keep certain lane configurations, but there's no comment here that says go 1 lane or go 2 lane. I've got one gentleman here who wants me to talk about his application for 1 lane. He says, I support keeping a fully implemented, keeping and fully implementing the plan for 1 lane configuration. She requires for the slow results in safer streets and nicer pedestrian and shopper experience in the business district, but is not necessary nor mindful of future community needs to accommodate cars. And then 5 emails that came in to me. I'll read these real quick. They're quick ones, and put this in the record also. One's grandkids baseball keep me from attending, but as we said before, we're going back to 2 lanes. I was just passed on the right of the day, keeping a bike lane. I hope you consider that people who live in Phoenix have to turn right, and it's crazy that a bike lane is on the right. Dear Mayor, I will not be attending the meeting about Main Street road diet, but let me make it clear, I want the 2 lane traffic pattern back. No road diet, exclamation mark. If we could have been asked before the road diet was put in, we would not be going through this now. The people of Phoenix would have said no, and that would have been it. No waste of money and everyone's time. Thank you, Shirley Kuzo. Number 3, thanks for the update. Maybe it will happen one of these days. 2-lane pattern sounds good to me. Problem is the longer it takes, more people might yell that we shouldn't change it. Oh my, Carol Phillips. 3 more quick ones. I prefer the 2-lane traffic configuration southbound. I'm not a fan of Ashland's road diet. Thanks. A guy named Jeff Ednother. Thank you, Chris, for your attention to our town's voices. We who drive these roads daily are tiring of near accidents and the road drivers. As we try to neck down to 1 lane, often we can see a steady stream of cars from one end of the 1-lane portion to the other. Hi, Chris, not be there on Monday, but I'm definitely in favor of going back to 2 lanes. Helen Lake of Phoenix. And lastly, return to 2-lane traffic pattern is fine with me. Thanks, Ed Polish. And I'll put those into the record. So we're going to hear from citizens now, and you got 3 minutes to speak. And we're going to hear from Dee and Bill. Renee? Renee. Dee, yeah, come on up. Dee, is this Scrappy Crafty? Okay, Heidi. Dee owns Scrappy Craft out of Main Street. She's at 511 North Main Street.
I've been a business owner here since 2002 in Phoenix. I own Divya and the artist at Scrappy Craft. I've been there long enough to see many of the changes in the town, including the city planners and council. One of the most profound changes the city had was changing to 1 lane. Since its placement, I have personally seen on a daily basis near misses, gridlock, driver's frustration, and hard honking. I have also witnessed some bumper bumps that I never saw in the 12 years before it happened. Crossing Highway 99 streets at 1st and 4th during the busy times of the days are almost impossible. It's also become a hazard. Other problems created from the 1 lane is turning off Highway 99 into crossroads. To turn right, many drivers pull over the parking lane, crossing the bike lane to even prevent a slowdown. They then turn from where the parking is supposed to be because there are no cars parked there, guys. When I asked the committee member, not you guys, but another person, what they were going to do about that, he said, oh, it's just a matter of education. And it's not a matter of educating, it's a matter of flow and a reasonable flow pattern. We don't have one. The bike lane in Phoenix is rarely used. I've seen 3 people on it. They were going the wrong way. They were going back and forth from the sidewalk to the street, to the sidewalk, to the street, and they never even got close to the bike lane. I also know about the boy that was hit in the street by a car going the wrong way, again, not following the rules, and it is a problem. We have a beautiful bike path. It runs from Central Point to Ashland. I ride it from Medford to work in the summertime. I ride it from my store to Ashland to have lunch. I ride it all the time. And so I know it's a great bike path and you can get on and off of it from several places in our town. And you don't need, I don't know why we have this bike lane. I really don't. It seems like when we have this beautiful bike lane that's safe, away from cars, why do we have to have one that's next to cars that's more dangerous? It seems ridiculous. I know that everybody wants to have Phoenix be a foot-friendly town. And you want this great dream of businesses being here and having people come to town. But first you need businesses that will actually promote the town so you have that. And I kind of went over with all my customers in the last couple weeks. And I'll say, what do you think about the one lane? Well, 90% of them hate it. They don't just not like it, they hate it. And then I asked them, the other percentage, the 3%, say, I really don't have a comment. So I didn't get anybody in my somewhat skewed, you could say, report say to me, I love it, I think it's great, what a great opportunity. Nobody said that. So what can we do to make Phoenix, I want Phoenix to be a great town. I have a business here. So I just know that when we ask people, what do you think of Phoenix? A lot of my customers say, well, we come to your store and then we go right back down the freeway. We try to avoid Phoenix. The traffic is too much of a hassle, and if we can do it, we'll avoid it. And I just feel bad about that.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up, we're gonna have Chuck Cox.
I don't have anything prepared.
Okay. Fine, thanks anyway, Chuck. Sandra Christensen. Is the recorder okay?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm Sandra Christensen. I no longer live in Phoenix. I live in Eagle Point. My business is still in Phoenix. The property in Phoenix is sold. I'm trying to sell my business, then I don't have to deal with 99 anymore. It's, you know, I've been in Phoenix since 1979, I think, so a very, very long time. And I've never seen anything more disturbing than switching the road to a one-way, and quite honestly, it's quite hazardous. You know, and like she said, people are driving into the parking area to make a turn onto 4th Street. I don't know how many times, because my business is on 4th up on Houston. I don't know how many times I've almost been nailed by people doing that exact same thing. And I'm very conscious of making sure there's nobody, even though I never see anybody in the bike path, make sure there's nobody there that I'm going to slam as I go around the corner. And so, you know, I would, even though I'm not going to be in Phoenix much longer, I hope, I would like to, yeah, I mean, I avoid Ashland with a passion because of their one way. And it isn't even in the business section. I have no idea why they did it. But I will avoid Ashland at all costs. And I do have to go there every Friday for deliveries. But I get out of there as fast as I can. And yeah, I'm sorry I will be saying goodbye to Phoenix eventually. But I won't, like I said, I won't have to deal with the road.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. Oh, I live at 461 Riley Road in Eagle Point.
Perfect. Thank you. Next up is Steve Dixon.
I didn't have anything prepared either, but I'll try to wait like she did.
Okay.
I don't know if I can add anything more, but I certainly agree with everything that's been said so far.
Come on, let me give us your address and name.
I'm 407 Coral Circle in Phoenix.
Okay.
And to get home, I go up 4th Street. And as others have said, it's a hazard there, turning where the Minute Market is off 99 onto 4th Street. Because you turn from the left lane, which I think isn't you're supposed to do it. So several times, I started to turn, and like the lady said, I looked to my right, and in my lane, On the right, which is the lane you're supposed to turn right from, the bike lane, it's a bike lane now, there was a car there. And luckily, we both stopped. So there was no accident, but it was a pretty close one. For Chuck, where it narrows down near where Stan's auto place is, Hotel, he had an accident there because they were narrowing down and another car ran into his car. So that in my mind is a very hazardous place, and it looks like if there's going to be a bike lane, it's going to run all the way down 99, and it's going to be the same. I don't know who's supposed to stop. If a bicycle's there, do I stop? Does it stop? Who stops? There's no sign. There's nothing to tell you. So I don't know. There's a lot of problems. I don't care really what configuration you use, but I would definitely like to see it go back to the way it was before, with 2 lanes each way. And I would guess that taking it down to 1 lane, step back in time, because I would imagine at some point it was 1 lane and it expanded out to 2 lanes because of the increased flow of traffic. So what I'm thinking is, if it narrows down to 1 lane, the traffic's not going to get any smaller as people, as there are more time, there's going to be more traffic. And so it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me to do that. Anyway, that's my win in it.
Okay, and next up, we're gonna have Sherry Clapton. I think we've had sort of 3 or 4 mayors that were Claptons.
Yes, you have. My name is Sherry Claflin, and I live at 108 6th Street. And we have quite a view of the narrowing down of traffic, and it's not pretty. There's lots of horn honking and confusion, and to try and turn north from 6th Street is near to impossible. So then we have to backtrack and use the light. But I understand it's not as easy as just going back and restriping, that now it's a thing. You know, it's like a big improvement thing. So I guess there's decisions have to be made and probably some more meetings have to be attended. But I am for going back to the 2-lane. And the bike lane, I'm not a fan, but I understand it's probably some kind of rule that you have to have it, but it's the way.
Okay. I appreciate your input. All right, thanks, Sherry. And Chuck and Jan Buther?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We just signed in.
All right,
We
thanks.
signed everything. I'd like to have some questions after I get up there.
You really can't ask questions, but we're not gonna go back with questions, but if you want to make some comments, we'll take your comments.
Okay, okay.
It's okay.
Oh, okay. I have to get up.
What's that?
I mean, normally, question or comment.
Come on.
Okay. I'd love to speak into the microphone.
Go back and forth.
Oh, I don't.
Answer, but at least.
I used to live in Phoenix, but I don't live there anymore, but just from listening to the comments and finding out.
Sorry, your name and address for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry, Janice Hauser, Heauser. And it's 3551 Grand. Okay. First of all, I really admire you guys' excitement about getting more people and more businesses. But frankly, I don't know how you plan to take care of them, because more people, more businesses, more traffic, and more accidents. And then another thing that I observed is, or thought about, and I don't honestly know the answer to this, do you have a school bus or a bus that goes through Phoenix?
Sure. Yeah, RVT.
And what happens if the bus stops to pick up a passenger? Do the people they go around the bus, or what happens?
We go around.
They go around, okay, and then the traffic behind them
So all the traffic goes around there, okay. So in a one-way street, what happens if there's people that have come to Phoenix? How is that gonna be handled?
The
And
lead,
especially with the parking on both sides.
the lead car kind of dictates what goes on in town. But I hear you, but I
Okay,
appreciate the question.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be picking on anybody, I'm just sitting here thinking, here, everything worked just fine, and I lived here for years. The other thought I had was, somebody mentioned a fire truck, like the fire truck goes through, does everybody just pull over like we're supposed to, or is there a place to pull over if there's on-street parking?
There is.
Okay, and then the last question is, it sounds like so many people are really encouraged by going back to the way it was. Do they have a chance? Or did they vote on? I know they did a survey kind of thing. And I don't know who to direct this question to.
Time will tell, we'll talk about that later on tonight.
Okay, that's all.
All right,
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Lyle? Come on up. And state your name and address, okay?
My name is Lyle Heigl. I live on Samuel Lane, 116 Samuel Lane in Phoenix. And coming home many times on 99, in the evening, whenever I was trying to get home, that traffic is all blocked up. You have to be very careful getting off of 2 lanes into 1 lane in front of Phoenix Auto, or you're gonna get hit. Because there's always somebody trying to beat you to it. And you have to be really careful. So I just back off, people behind me honking. I don't know what else to say other than there was a lot of good information from the other speakers. And done a good job presenting what's available. Don't have much more to say, but thank you for listening.
Thanks, Lyle.
Thank you.
Next up is Doreen. Whatever.
I'm at 925 South B Street, right off the door, the gate. But my husband and I have lived in this valley in our property for 27 years. And we go from one direction to the other. When we pull going south, pull right there in front of the light there at Ray's, my husband says, okay, the race is on. And he watches the cars race to see which one's gonna make it over to get through there. If there is an RVTV bus that stops right there, you've got traffic backed up and cars are trying to come around it. And I've seen a couple cars almost hit other cars. So either way you guys decide to do, our downtown is a mess right now because people are not following the directions. They're not following the rules. You have people that don't go the sidewalks. You have people, instead of bicycles, they run their wheelchairs down the main road. We've had several of them hit. We've had one gentleman killed a couple of years ago, just before the bank there itself, because he had his sidewalk right there in front of the 7-Eleven. Yeah, but that is something we gotta look at. Because if you now in Medford, when you go into Medford, they don't have just a direct bike lane. They just have a symbol bike lane. So there isn't a, line directly for bikes. And I see a lot of bicycles and a lot of cars respect that. I don't see where we have to directly make a direct bike lane. As long as you've got the symbols there, most drivers know if there's a bicycle rider, they're gonna be right there. Bicycle riders out on Houston Road and that, then I see downtown Phoenix.
Thanks, Ray. And, Martha Hess?
Martha Hess, and I live at 110 4th Street, so the corner of 4th and Church. And I guess somebody has to take the other side on this. I really like it at one lane. I've lived at where I live for 14 years now, and in order for me to go anywhere, I have to 99 and either turn right to go south or cross over and go the other way. And I just haven't seen it be that big of a problem. There are times when there's a little bit of a wait to turn, but I think it's really possible to fix that with the timing of the stoplight in front of Ray's. If those lights are, or the stoplight on Bolts, if that's a certain way, then that can fix having time to make those turns onto 4th. It seems to me like a lot of the issues that are really troubling people are issues that happened because of the way this was done, the way that it was implemented as a trial, the actual infrastructure being put in. And so it was really unclear to people about how to follow the rules. And people were so used to doing it a certain way that they just kind of kept doing it that way. And I think a lot of the issues that people are having would be alleviated by following the plan and having all that stuff on both sides of the street. It would make it really clear that this is the lane that you drive in. It would clear up those accidents. And the merging problem needs to be fixed regardless of what happens with the street. I mean, that merging, whatever, if you're gonna go from, if 99 is gonna be one lane from between Medford and Ashland, it seems strange to me that we would suddenly open it up to 2 lanes in Phoenix and then go back down to 1 lane. It makes sense to me that we would do 1 lane all the way through. That's the plan that I've heard, that eventually 99 is going to be 1 lane. And so it's a little bit wrong-headed to me to think about, let's widen Phoenix downtown to 2 lanes, when we want downtown to be a place for businesses and families and kind of a city center area, to all of a sudden make that 2 lanes. I would support compliance with the city center plan, because I think the idea of having the downtown being a place that looks like a downtown plaza with, I like the double landscaping on both sides, because trees are attractive and they make you want to come downtown. 2 lanes of traffic isn't. If we want to bring people downtown and have pedestrians downtown, 2 lanes of traffic is tough to cross. I see it all the time in Ashland. You start across a crosswalk, and the car in the lane closest to you, whichever side you're on, sees you, but they're blocking the view of the other lane, and so you're kind of like, okay, is the lane gonna see me too? Whereas if there's 1 lane, pedestrians, you can look and you can make eye contact with the driver and know that they can see you. So, am I done with time?
You are.
Okay, thank you.
Just one point of clarification, there's still gonna be 2 lanes going north so going north of Phoenix on 2 lanes.
And 1 lane going south.
1 lane
Okay.
going south, right. Next up is Dan Casad.
My name is Dan Casad. I live at 4281 Coleman Creek Road. I lived there for, moved there when I was 9. I've been here a long, long time. Been using the streets of Phoenix, doing business in Phoenix, because I have my business at home. I'm here a lot. I'm in favor of what most people have said here. This 2 lane or this 1 lane thing is just a disaster. The idea that Highway 99 south of here and coming in all the southbound is going to be also a stupid idea. It needs to stay 2 lanes. Leave it alone. We don't need it. I don't know who has a gun to your head forcing this bike lane thing through Phoenix. It's ridiculous. We don't need it. We have a bike lane, it's already been stated. We don't need another one. And if we eliminate the bike lane, you don't have a problem with space going through Phoenix. It just is not a problem. I think that I appreciate the work you guys are putting into this, but it does seem to me like going back to the way it was is just plain not going to happen. We have to add a bike lane, we have to do this, we have to have pedestrian bulb outs. That's not the way it was. And it worked just fine the way it was. Without any of that, we got along fine.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, guys. Still here?
Yeah, I didn't go anywhere.
I'm here. You're hiding back there.
Name's George T. Eisenhower. I moved here in 2004 from Fontana, California. When I moved there was 35,000 people. When I left, there was over 200,000. So the traffic here is nothing. But what I want to say is, when I moved up here, I decided I wanted a small city. That's why I moved here. And I decided to get on the planning commission. Now, I worked on so many meetings with different councils, and we come up with this plan because this was going to make the downtown a walkable community. That's what everybody that we was working with, the prior councils, past couple of councils, urban renewal, planning commission, all these people worked a lot of hours on this. We had meeting after meeting after meeting. The main thing of it is, this never came about. The one lane is a major. It never really came to this because of weather. They couldn't do the striping of it. But everyone, the way everyone talked, they wanted a downtown walkable community. Well, if you wanted a walkable community, you can't have a two-lane highway run through it. I know there's going to be a lot of you folks who don't care for that. But this is what was working. Now it's up to this council here and the next planning commission if you're going to change it. But it never had a chance. That's in my opinion. It never really had a chance to look like this because all this is paint. Paint is cheap compared to if this was done in concrete. And we didn't want to do that as a planning commission or the prior councils. We wanted to do it in paint and see how this worked. But it never made it to this stage. They never worked at this stage. But all I can tell you is if you want a safe, walkable community, you can't have a highway running through it. That's my opinion. And I do thank you, councilors, for your service to the community. It's a tough job. No matter what you do, you're going to make everybody happy.
Thank you. Glenn Archibald? Glenn here? Here, Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor.
Go state your address, okay? Go state your address.
Oh, sure. You guys hear me okay?
Yep.
There's a little dim in the back there.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. My name is Glenn Archambault. I live at 4307 Royal Crest Road. I'm a citizen of Phoenix, but that's not far from Phoenix. My family owned a business here in Phoenix for 25 years. We've owned a farm for 23 years on the east side. So I've had a lot of experience at this road business. I was there when they first started talking about changing the roads in Phoenix. Something I'd like to cover here is not necessarily about one or two lanes. I think you guys will figure that out. But I would like to cover this issue. As a business owner, we've gone through so many ups and downs and different projects and approaches and different city councils, the state of Oregon, Jackson County, ODOT, US DOT, everybody is not on the same page. And so as a business owner, what we heard was, we would like you to go away. That's what we frequently heard, and we heard that in this nature, that we're going to make this difficult for you to be here. Those of us who lived through the days of them building a new freeway here learned that the hard way. This place was unfriendly to businesses, to consumers, people who visited here in Phoenix. The word you heard from them frequently was, gee, this is not a very nice place. And why they were saying that was because they drive into town one day, you could get through a dusty construction area, the next day get through there, they wouldn't tell you you couldn't get through there. And so we ended up as businesses trying to be the ambassador between the city and county government and the consumer. And that was a really difficult place to be. So here's something I'm going to suggest needs to happen here. We need to get some focus back in those businesses and not so much on roads, because we've already done all this. We've done this so many times about different road systems and been told any day now you're going to love what's going to happen. Well, that day never came. So we need to stay on course in some fashion, and you need to really know that the businesses out there are really struggling to get people to come here and start a business, but they're not going to pay. They can't. It's just too much trouble. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. Wayne and Joanne. 109. Well, I can't read the writing.
That's because I put in multiple, we have multiple homes in the area.
Okay.
And we have a cattle ranch south of town. You sit down. Anyways,
State your name and your address. Okay?
Wayne Hanson, 52 South Pacific Highway, Phoenix. Anyways, the lady from Scrappy Craft covered most of the points that we had thought about, and so she covered them really well. One thing that was touched on, is when the buses stop on the northbound side, whether they're school bus or RVTD, the cars back up and they just line up. And then another point that was touched on was the safety and security of individuals trying to cross the southbound from 1st Street, 4th Street, Oak Street during the heavy rush hours, especially between 3:30 and about 5:30 that are heading south. And those people line up and they can't get across and they have to jet across real quick. Another issue my wife and I were talking about, what happens when I-5 is shut down? There's a big wreck and everybody's coming through town. You have one lane. I know everybody's talking about, hey, let's make this a walkable community. Let's start with the businesses, building the businesses so they want to walk through here. But until then, get a traffic flow. You have I-5 shut down, then you can't get through town, either direction. We find that when we're driving through town, and I hope this doesn't sound disjointed, but I made up all the notes as I'm sitting back here listening. As we're driving through town, we don't even look at businesses because we're too focused on this stop start of the cars that are doing the, running a race through town. The one individual mentioned jockeying for position right in front of Scrappy Craft there, and we see it all the time. Flying up the side trying to get past you to get into that one single lane to get through town. You've got ODOT spent what, 75 million or something for interchange, whatever, however many millions, multiple lanes to squeeze down to one lane. It doesn't seem to make sense. The fact that we have multiple commercial interests in the area as well as multiple homes, we're interested in how the city of Phoenix does. We've been here for both of our families, multiple generations here, multiple decades here in the Phoenix area. and I don't think we're gonna go anywhere. So we'd like to see it succeed.
Give them another 30 seconds, okay?
I'm done. Did you want to say anything else? Okay.
Good.
Sorry, I hope it wasn't too disjointed.
No, you're fine.
Thank you.
Okay. Paul, okay.
Paul K., 4495 South Pacific Highway. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Well, first I want to acknowledge Sarah Westover and Evan McKenzie for attending and participating in the Housing Summit this past week for the future of housing in Rogue Valley. Now back on topic. As I've testified before, I don't actually have a strong advocacy of 1 lane versus 2 lanes. I do have preferences, but what's more important is functional transportation. The businesses rely on it, and safe travel of human beings, whether they're on wheels or on foot or motorized wheels or pedal. I notice in the council packet that the council goals supported was cited, goal 2, maintain and enhance safe and well-lit walkability and multimodal transportation options. So this is the key. The decision today, I mean, today is a short-term future. Maybe it'll take another few months, but anyhow, the decisions being made now, I hope will have a vision of transportation and social gathering space generation and beyond. And so judging the decision or measuring the decision only by past patterns and comparing it to present disappointment is actually invalid as well, along with being really heartfelt and truly seen. It's actually invalid. Where are we going in the future? I've made a significant investment in Phoenix and continuing to make significant investment, betting on, in part, non-motorized transportation. It's important for business owners to understand that bicycles have smaller trunks and bigger wallets, meaning they're more dependent on purchasing services at the time of being in a local environment. There are countless studies of the density of pedestrians and bicycles actually being significant economic intensity or economic development intensification. So it's dollars per square foot per period of time if you're in a retail business. And that's enhanced by denser transportation of bicycles and pedestrians, as well as access from automobiles. There were some comments about maybe the bike lane being going through town is superfluous, and Bear Creek Greenway could serve instead. Bear Creek Greenway has a speed limit of 15 miles per hour, and so bicycle commuters who actually want to make time between A and B, getting from home to work and back, can't use Bear Creek Greenway, or they would endanger the people taking more leisurely bikes and strolls. And so that's why the Highway 99 is actually dedicated more as a transportation bikeway. In the comments, as far as there's not much traffic observed, so I'm on Highway 99. I take care of cleaning the shoulder now and then, and I see people walking by, dozens of people per day. I see bicycles frequently. I don't have a feel for a count, but there is traffic, and I hope it can be accommodated safely, and I hope we can give them plenty of reasons to stop and lighten their wallets. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate your service.
We have Chamber of Commerce President Melissa Weige here also. Did you want to speak?
Oh, I think it's pretty much all been covered. Do you want me to speak?
If you want to, we have the chamber, it's fine. We don't have to.
Melissa Weige, Chamber President. So I focus more on business, as everyone knows. I really want to bring more business to Phoenix. And I know in the developmental plan when it had started, the reason they took it down to 1 lane was because of speed. I was actually across the street in the little gray building with the yellow, and I would see people doing 60 miles an hour. 2 lanes of traffic. It was ridiculous. And so I understand the slowing down of the traffic and putting it into one lane so that people would like actually see what was going on in Phoenix as they drove through. But when they put flashing lights, I think that stopped that. Like people like, whoa, okay, slow down a little bit. So I think taking it back to 2 lanes is better. And I don't understand why we can't share lanes anymore with bicycles like we used to. Like we have this one designated area instead of like what was said. In Metro, if there's a bicycle there, you move over. And I think that the white lines where the bicycles are just confuse people. They're like, do I cross it? Do I not cross it? And then there's the people that just don't care and they go, if there's not a car parked there, they will pass the traffic in the parking lane just to do it. And then it causes somebody who's going into the turn lane. So I agree it should go back to 2 lanes and that's what everybody thinks, most of all. But how to do that is kind of up to them.
Thank you very much. Okay. That's it for the public comment period. And with church, we had some technical issues that we needed staff to cover, but I couldn't see any issues that staff needs to step up to and answer. Did you hear any questions out there that staff needs to address besides 2 lanes going north out of Phoenix?
That's critical.
Evan, did you hear anything you need to address?
The only thing I'd say is that the Cheryl option is not recommended by both the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials and the National Association of City Transportation.
Talk about what a Cheryl is.
So that's the bike, I'll get back here so everybody can hear. So the Cheryl option, which is what Medford did, and honestly, I'm not sure how they did it, is where bikes and cars are supposed to coexist, and ideally, cars go around bikes.
Well, Cheryl's live in the road, right?
Right, and so I'm glad I have this. Let me go to, actually, I think it's on one of the extra pages at the bottom here.
Evan, the slide's not lined up there.
You got it. Oh, well, I'll wait till I get there, if it is in fact on here. And it is. So this is, let's see, no, that doesn't matter. So right here, Federal Highway Administration defines a bicycle boulevard as a low-stress shared roadway bicycle facility designed for bicyclists operating within a roadway shared with motor vehicle traffic. National Association of City Transportation Officials says bicycle boulevards are streets with low motorized traffic volumes and speeds, designated and designed to give bicycle travel priority. So that is why and that was one of the options here that we discussed previously, and that was why we took that off, because Main Street is simply not an appropriate street for that treatment. It's an arterial that's designed for higher volumes and speeds. A bicycle boulevard is designed, it is supposed to be on a street where you can let your 10-year-old ride by themselves in traffic. Now, anybody here want to raise their hand if they want their 10-year-old to ride on Main Street? Okay, I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, when I'm questioning.
So,
but
this is just to answer a couple of
that's
questions.
okay, I apologize. That's the design intent for that type of treatment, so it is not appropriate on an arterial street. So I apologize, that was my bad.
That's okay.
Other than that, I don't really think that we need to address anything, but just to say that that was the reason that we did not show that option tonight.
Okay, appreciate it. Okay, thank you.
I have a comment.
No, Jolene, I'm not gonna take comments. I appreciate your passion.
No, the reason is you.
I understand.
No, he was wrong. And what I was talking about is right there by Winco, it has, and it going down river, it has just a bike emblem. And if that isn't heavy traffic, then I don't know what is.
Jolene, I appreciate your passion, but okay, we're good. We're gonna stop all the comments for now. Like I said, I appreciate your passion. Okay.
Mayor, can I clarify one technical item?
Okay.
There's been a lot of discussion about the retiming of the signalization at Bowles and at Ray's. It's actually a fairly complicated signal timing process there. It's not as simple as it seems because you have to receive a certain volume to fill up the laneage between Ray's and Bowles. And you've got to release that in a fashion that allows the preceding traffic volumes to move through. When we see higher traffic volumes, we also see higher pedestrian volumes. And when you hit that pedestrian crosswalk button, signal progression time is going to be altered. So I know that a lot of people have heard the discussions about modifications, potential modifications to the signal timing. I've gone through them a little bit with the folks at ODOT. It will be a difficult process to get better platooning than what you're seeing out of that signal timing because of the proximity of the two signals together and the preponderance of pedestrian crossings during high traffic volume periods.
That goes back to even before your time, in 2015. The theory was wait till we get the Bowles light before we talk about going back to 2 lanes. That light will take the platooning, which it has not. Right?
Fair enough.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ray. So, we're going to move into council discussion. It's been a long time since we took a break. You guys want a quick break, and then we'll go into council discussions. It's up to you. We can keep rolling along if you want. Okay, that's fine. I want to say a few things to begin with, and I just want to go over kind of the history, the history of what's happened in the past. Because the October 2015, we did the restriping, right? And then we went to 1 lane. In December 2015, we started getting feedback from in town, and Steve Dalley, the city manager, put together some information in his newsletter, or his information to council. It's a 24/4. Thanks for coming, guys. Appreciate it. If we could, yeah. Okay. So it's 24/4 for the complaints against road diet. And at one point, before everyone's time, he said we have and will do nothing that will prevent the city from bringing the couplet up to 2 lanes in the future if need be. And that was a promise to the citizens, and as a council, we don't have to do that, but you can, if you want, honor that promise from a previous council, but you don't have to as a new city council. As of June 2017, I received just 4 voicemails. 100% of them wanted to go back to 2 lanes. Now I've got 30 voicemails. I still keep them. They're archived. And I got 30 voicemails on there. You guys are welcome to listen at any time. And 90% are wanting to. 1 person wanted to stay with 1 lane. As of June 2017, I had 91 emails. 93% of them wanted to go back to 2 lanes. And now I have over 100 emails. And again, 90% want to go back to 2 lanes. People still write letters. I have 3 actually handwritten letters that go on lanes and 1 digital letter that somebody sent me. Some time ago, Mim or Puck's Donuts asked me to put a survey into her shop, and it's completely unsolicited. And the survey said, would you like to go back to 2 lanes or keep Main Street as 1 lane as it is? And 66 out of 67 respondents answered they want to go back to 2 lanes. 1 person was in Ashland that said no, we'll go to 1 lane, whereas 93% go back to 2 lanes. There were 21 speakers that spoke the last time we had a forum like this, and there were 2 that wanted to go to 1 lane. So 95% of them wanted to go back to 2 lanes. Tonight it's like 83%. I did a business survey and I updated it recently. I went to Gem Coffee Shop. The owner, Darren, and his son Andrew works there. They want to go back to 2 lanes. When it's right in front of their shop, it's people, like I said, jockeying for position, and people can't get out of their shop. Gem Coffee Shop is brand new, and they want to go to a 2-lane configuration. There were 39 responses from business throughout downtown, and 85% of them want to go back to 2 lanes. It includes Deep and Scrappy Craft, Rob, the guy who's right across from Stan's place, the transmission shop. I've gone up and down Main Street numerous times, and 93% of the businesses want to go back to 2 lanes. the gal who owns Subway, Terry, she sold her business. She said, I can't make it. She attributed her business to the two-lane, the one-lane configuration. And she finally sold her business to somebody else that owns a Subway over in town. She's gone, out of town. Right next door, you got Pucks, we got the gal who owns the shop, and every time I go in there, she's always yelling at me, two lanes, two lanes. She got hit, and she also contributes, decreased her business to the way things are configured. I do have a solution. To me, the solution, I'm going to give my 2 cents worth as far as what the solution is, and take it from there. But my solution is to do staff's recommendation, the recommendation they have for a 2-lane option. And it is the option number 2. It's 2 11-foot lanes, 5.5-foot bike lane, and 8-foot parking. And then have the left-hand side and have that be a place where you can have coffee, sit outside, and there would be furniture. A lot of folks vote against having a bike lane. We can still have a bike lane in town and still have 2 lanes. And the 2 lanes does solve 2 problems. One is the jockeying for position at the beginning of the couplet, and the second is it being tough to get out. I was in Figueroa's Pizza having a calzone. John's on the counter looking at me, the owner, and he's like, when are you going to take care of that problem down there? His guy didn't come in and out of 4th Street and in the business to deliver pizza. He's not happy. He was going to get claimed, he couldn't make it. The 2 lanes, playing jockeying for position, and the traffic being backed up. Walkability, we call it walkability and safety. Guys, if we have 2 lanes and we have blowouts and we have rapid flashing beacons at 1st, 4th, and maybe someplace else, people are going to be able to cross the street safely. We can even bring the speed down from where it is now, 30. We came down from 35 to 30. We come down from 30 miles an hour to 25 miles per hour. Put rapid flashing beacons in there. Put striping in the road. And we're not going to have a problem with people crossing the street if you have rapid flashing beacons. Those things just boom, boom, boom. They hit you like that, and you're going to stop and you're going to allow someone to cross. Right now, it is tough to cross. To me, we can make the citizens happy, or 90% of them, with going back to 2 lanes. The bikers are happy because they get the bike lane, and the businesses are happy because, for whatever reason, they feel it should go back to a 2-lane configuration. Earlier, I would keep the 30, make it 25 miles per hour, and put a second flashing sign. Right now, the flashing sign at the very beginning slows people down. I put a second flashing sign just after 1st Street, just in case someone starts to ramp up after 1st Street, have another sign there that says, hey, 25 miles per hour or 30 miles per hour. And it's also the lowest cost solution. 2 cents worth. I went quickly because we don't have a lot of time tonight. We're going to take my time, I guess, if we need. We could go to 10 o'clock, but I don't want to. But that's my 2 cents worth, my solution. Mr. President, what do you have?
First of all, I want to thank the staff. They played an important part in orchestrating the ability for us to come to a decision, coming in a course of direction. And I know that our planning department and our public works had to work together and had to come up with ideas. And that was a really hard thing to do because they had to play with all the variables. How do you make it safe for people walking, bicycles, vehicles? How do you handle financials on anything that you have to do that's different than it is right now? Looking at the desires of the people in the community and the businesses in the communities. Fixing or trying to fix the optics, as I call them, of what the thing looks like now. It feel right. It has never felt right since the first day I got on it. It just doesn't make sense to me mentally when I'm driving to have it the way it is exactly right now. I heard mention, I don't know if the staff looked into it in any great degree, but the ever-increasing of people and therefore vehicles of all types that are going to be passing through this part of the valley over the years. So I'm looking at people yet unborn that aren't here, and our decision tonight is going to in some way affect them as they travel through this area. And how do you want to affect those who are not here yet? I think if you look at it from a fluid dynamic standpoint, 1 lane constricts things, makes it much slower, which has a safety aspect, which is good. But it also is going to become cumbersome as we go forward over the years, as more vehicles particularly occupy that space going north-south pedestrians. And I don't think the one lane is going to do it. It's going to become a choke point. The basic mistake that we're trying to fix and we can't fix is that our main downtown straddles for many, many blocks a state highway. Not a good place to have a downtown to begin with. So there's a trade-off between what we want to do as residents here, perhaps for the walkability, which is a good thing to do, and it's a good goal to get to. But you just can't get there when it's a state highway, because now you're a choke point. We, as one can say, what happens when I-5 is down? We're going to have a major problem coming through there. So those people are going to be affected adversely because there's no way to get through anymore. To me, after trying to consult the Oracle of Delphi, as a great one said, he got an answer, I don't have one. They decided not to answer me. But from a personal standpoint, I think the one that makes the most sense of all the variables put together and the compromises is the option 2. Because it seems to have the right size of the lanes, to have parking at least on one side, and it does have a bike lane. And I know there are people that don't like bikes on where vehicles are. Sometimes I feel that way too when I'm in the wrong place. But I used to ride a bike when I was a kid, and I know how unsafe it was not having a bike lane because they weren't invented yet. So I think having a bike lane is probably a good thing. The question is size, and 6 feet, 5 feet, 5.5 on option 2 is kind of a compromise. That's one more of the compromise. So I think that's where I'm kind of at, is that if I had to pick tonight, I would kind of go with that option because it's kind of the sweet point among all the different variables that we have here. So once again, thanks to the staff for at least coming forward with ideas and concepts, and of course the directions we could work with, very much in the spirit that you did recently with Church Street, trying to answer all the variables that were there and come up with courses of action that made everybody at least mostly happy. So thank you for your good work.
Mr. Vice President, speak at this point?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I agree a lot with what Jim said, and also thank you all for showing up and voicing your opinions and actually partaking in government, which is always nice to see. You know, I want to echo a lot of what Jim said about option 2. I think the 2 lanes is a good option for us. I think the point coming off of Bowles Road is just, it's too soon from the light for it to effectively work as a filter. I definitely feel strongly about maintaining the bike lane downtown and also maintaining pedestrian-friendly crosswalks. My one caveat with that pole going to 2 lanes is going to be dropping speed limits down. I'd like to see it even go to 20 miles an hour, because if we set it at 20, that means the car will drive 25, which would be a decent speed, I think, for going through downtown.
Thank you very much. You guys want to come down with Mr. Baker?
Me? Sure.
You. Mr. McDonald. Sure. I just want to give the President and Vice President a chance to go.
I'm grateful to staff for the great job they did, Evan and Ray. Great job on the presentations, much appreciated. I appreciate both sides of the argument as well. I hear both sides and understand everybody here has valid points. They really do. The overwhelming support is going back to 2 lanes. There's no denying it. This is how many meetings we've had, and over and over, it's always an overwhelming support for going back to 2 lanes. My personal opinion of the 2, I like it myself. I feel like it flows better. There's a couple things that come up to mind with me is that, first of all, we're trying to bring business in. We all agree with that's great. We are hearing from businesses that this current configuration is driving them out of town. The one person who came up was pretty strong about that. I don't see her right now, but she was pretty strong. No, there's another one too. It's out on Houston Road. Yeah, wow. Powerful stuff there to say, can't wait to get out of town. That's the opposite of what we want. We want to invite everyone to welcome. And I know that there's no intention here. We're just trying to make the best decision to bring in more people. Something else is the traffic is just going to increase over the years. This is not going to get to be less of a traffic area. In fact, we're hoping to increase traffic. I do understand the need for a bike lane. I get that. talked a little bit about that as far as the true transit riders versus recreational riders. If we have to have a bike lane, we have to have a bike lane, but I strongly feel we have to have 2 lanes of travel. There's a couple of reasons. I actually thought of the I-5 issue. Something happens on I-5, we're gonna have a road issue. And also, I think, if nothing else, it gets back to me on this, that this was sold to the citizens as a trial. If you don't like it, you don't have to have it. And it's real clear they don't like it. And I feel like we should, even though it's not necessarily a promise that we made, it's a promise. And I'd like to see every effort made we could to maintain the integrity of our word. Let's see. What else do I have? Oh, and as far as you know, there's been some great points made tonight about the choke point, you know, of Phoenix Automotive. And I live very close to there, so I see it. I live it. I live it. And it occurs to me that if there's going to be a choke point, let's say they do put 1 lane down Highway 99, right, coming into Phoenix, coming, you know, at the south end couplet. That choke lane, I mean, I personally had my issues at that choke point, and people do make, it's like a joke around town. Oh, you're coming into Phoenix, jockey for position, NASCAR, you know, that kind of thing. And it would be nice if we went back to 2 lanes so that we could move that choke point out of town. In other words, if we put it at the south end of town, now we don't have that choke point right in town. Somebody else brought up a great point. ODOT just built this big overpass, this interchange, meant to dump traffic right into that intersection, and we're going from all that to very. And I just think it would be wise to open that back up. That's about it as far as just, you know, we're going to talk more about this tonight, I'm sure. But those are just my top thoughts. I would really recommend. I like the option number 2. It maintains the bike lane, maintains the outside porchy type of area on the sidewalks, and we still get 2 lanes of traffic as is so powerfully requested tonight and the other nights.
Thank you, Councilor Fung.
All right, it's been a battle back and forth with me for sure. There's so many pros and cons to all of this. It's going to be here for a while. It's expensive. Everybody in town uses it. It's impossible to please everybody with it. And I've gone back and forth, and I've talked with quite a few people on both sides of the issue also. I'll start with this. I'm in support of hybrid option, option 2. And I'll tell you what. I think it's the best hybrid option. With the public, I think 2 lanes is overwhelming. With growth and with the choke point down at the north end of town, it's rough.
You mean that the 1 lane is overwhelming, or the 2 lanes is overwhelming?
Yeah, I think, well, let me swing back around. Option 2. I think the choke point down there is tough. It's bad flow. It's dangerous, and if we can have a choke point outside of our town, prefer that, not to shirk it off on somebody else. But so I think with the public, I think the overwhelming is 2 lanes. One thing I may be against the public, but we've all kind of talked about it, is a dedicated bike lane. I think that's really important for the commuters, and I think it's in the spirit of Oregon and trying to be more environmentally people that want to do that exercise. I'd want to be part of a contiguous bike lane. I hope we could get one on the street for commuters all the way from Medford all the way to Ashland once they do the rest of ODOT redoes the rest of the road. Personally, I like the landscaping. I think it'll beautify our downtown quite a bit. I think it'll be nice. I can see some trees really growing and changing, or the color season. I think it'd be nice. I want it to be business and pedestrian friendly, and my primary concern with the 2 lanes is safety, though, but I think there's some ways we can address this. With 2, the second lane when you're crossing the street is particularly dangerous, and you see this quite a bit, where the first lane will stop, but you need to make sure the second lane stops too. It's kind of a blind point there, so we need to figure out a way to be as safe and as intentional with that as possible. Also, with option 2, another concern I have second lane, the east side lane, is close to the sidewalk on the east side, and where people would be sitting with the streetscape furniture and things like that. So I want to be intentional about that, because if you've got people driving 25 feet, 25 miles per hour, a foot away from a bench, I want to be intentional about that too, and think about safety concerns there. So I guess I have four caveats with this. I'd be in favor of option 2, the 2-lane option with the bike lane and the 1 parking side. What I'd like to see though is at each of the crosswalks, not just a couple, each of the crosswalks, rapid flashing beacons on both sides of the street. So regardless if you were crossing from east to west or west to east, both lanes would have a flashing sign letting them know there was going to be a pedestrian. The bike lane stays protected through the south couplet, so there's no charging the bikes have to do there, that's protected all the way between us and Talent. We've got warning signs at the crosswalks or something, maybe we can brainstorm that. Both directions it says maybe something to the effect, watch for the far lane traffic, or be careful of the far lane traffic from wherever you're coming from. And the speeds, Chris, I agree with you. An extra flashing speed limit sign at first, and maybe setting the speed at 25 to make sure people are consistent, not just slowing down at the north end of town, but slowing through the rest of town also. So I'd like to maybe discuss some of the details, but it sounds like a lot of us who's spoken so far is leaning towards 2.
I want to the council camera just mentioned that your point about the tables being close to the road. There are some communities that have just pillars, like pipes that come out of the ground, and they don't look that bad. They're like plastic with cement in order to stop cars from going onto a curb. They do it in Vegas a lot. Vegas had a horrible problem where someone came up the road one time.
For sure.
Out of Vegas not too long ago, and those poles are everywhere.
Yeah, free drinks and cards no mix.
Council Karen.
I want to thank staff for having multiple opportunities for the public to have comment. I think that's super important to continually hear what our community wants, which is to have the 2 lanes back. I owned a business in Phoenix for many years before they went to the single lane, and I drive my current work. I'm driving constantly, 5 times a day through the interchange and hitting I-5 and people coming from Ashland and Medford and the bottlenecking that goes on. I lean towards option 2 simply because part of what I think is we want to attract business to our community, and in order to attract business, to have a flow and have the ability for people to patron our businesses, and if we don't have that ability and people don't want to stop because the traffic flow is not worth the hassle or not worth stopping, they're going to take their business someplace else. So I mirror everything everybody has to say, and we don't need to repeat everything again, but that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, thanks. So I don't have much to say that's much different than other folks, but I want to thank staff and I want to thank our community members for turning out. I also want to thank the council because I think that from where we started on this issue and where we landed, we've had a very good process. I think where we started on this issue was actually we said, well, let's either keep it the way it is or go back to the way it was. And clearly neither of those options work. And so since then, that conversation has evolved into new scenarios, and which we actually asked staff to help develop. And there's more, it's not just about a 1 or 2 lane configuration, it's about the whole package. And that's something that we were able to work with staff in order to do. And so we have some really nice scenarios that we didn't have the first time that we had this conversation. But there's more nuance to talking about road configurations, especially in your downtown area and corridor. We want to attract businesses, but also certainly make it walkable and accessible. So I think that through our process, we've been able to talk about some of those nuances and sculpt something that's a hybrid that wouldn't have about unless we had this process and these conversations. Like Mike, I want to add that some of the things that are really highlights for me is bike, pedestrian, and traffic safety. And we know that reduced speeds mean reduced accidents all across the board. For me, is that we have to have a bike lane. People do bike in Phoenix, people do walk a lot in Phoenix, and increasingly, the next big generation of people are the least likely generation of people to drive. So we're seeing multimodal transportation become more and more of a trend. And as a body that makes decisions, we can't address what's happening right now, but we also have to look towards the future. So creating a walkable, accessible downtown is not only one of our goals as a council, but it just makes sense for the future. I also, I think that the configuration number 2 makes a lot of sense given those criteria and this looking at safety, if we're looking at walkability, if we're looking at some of the issues that we had with traffic flow, then this makes sense. I think if we went back to the way that Main Street was before, it wouldn't address some of those issues and it wouldn't make any sense. So I'm glad that we have a new option to pursue. So I think that the second option does make a lot of sense. My caveat to that, I do have a couple of caveats like Mike does. So one, you can see existing 2-lane configurations that are walkable and do make sense. So I think of where Highway 99 runs through Medford and also through Ashland. And one of the ways that they've made that walkable and accessible is 2 things. One, reducing speeds. That is going to be good for everyone. That will reduce traffic accidents and pedestrian accidents. That is something we absolutely need to do. I would recommend going down to 20 miles per hour. That's what it is in Medford. And if we're making something business friendly, which again was part of the original reason. So going back to our planning documents and our city center and our comprehensive plan, the reason that former councilors and commissioners decided to go down to 1 lane was to make a downtown area and not just make Phoenix a drive-through area that people just used on their way to get to something else. So it still makes sense to me to, if we're not going to do 1 lane, to bring speeds down significantly. And so we've seen those examples. So I think it's 15 in Ashland where they brought the sidewalks way out, and in Medford it's 20 and they brought the sidewalks way out. And they have more and more of a thriving pedestrian, business-oriented population there. So I think those are the concerns that I have. Again, it's mostly around speeds. I like the idea of having an additional light. We are going to put in another crosswalk on the Bear Creek side. That's something that we hope to secure funding for at the MPO. So I think this was a good process, and I would like to see us do more consensus building in the future, as opposed to presenting things that are either or type scenarios, because I think there's so much in between and so much nuance that we need to explore when it comes to city planning and doing.
Thank you very much. So I can see that we're moving towards a consensus on option number 2, but before we even go there, I just want to say that to Martha in particular, and to all those that want slower traffic and walkability, I want you to look back maybe a year from now and go, wow, this works. Even with the rapid flashing beacons are great crossing the lower speed limit, whether it be 25 or 20. I'm not sure what, ODOT has to prove speed limits, and hoping to go down to 20 right away. Maybe we can, I'm not sure. So my hope is that all those who wanted 1 lane because of safety and speed problems look back a year from now and go, this is nice. This is kind of what I wanted in the first place. And we make even more people happy. Right now, I think we're at 90%. I think there's a collective sigh of relief here in the city, and all the business downtown going, oh, thank goodness. They're going back to 2 lanes. And I think they're going to hear us, and they like the fact that we listened again. And I like that the council deliberated and we move forward. This is 2 in a row. We've done a really nice job for the citizens. And with that said,
Congratulations.
Is there any more deliberation? Anybody want to say anything else?
Just on the process. It sounds like we're all consensus on option 2. How does this process work as we kind of work down the road with details? Do we pick an option now and then down the road we work on details, or do we have to work those out before we accept the option?
You have to make a motion in order to have staff move forward with option number 2.
Okay.
And then they can handle, there's going to be a variance, there's going to be some other things that they handle. Well, that's where I see it. But David, I see you moving forward. You want to address that?
I think I probably should.
Sure, Dave.
Basically, what we'll do at the staff level is develop some preliminary design and engineering work and bring it back to you to take a look at. And I think we've heard what your preferences are in terms of crosswalks and RFDs, some of the other amenities that we might put in the street. And then when we do have the design and engineering more fully developed, we'll have to go to the planning commission to get a variance in order to do this. I also want to remind Chris that a year from now, when we look back, actually a year from now, you're going to see exactly what we have on the street right now.
Construction timeline.
It won't be till next summer when we actually do this.
Hopefully next spring, we'll be able to do the overlay project and then do the overlay and then do the striping after you do the overlay. So it's going to be at least a year before we even start on this project.
And
question real quick. My friend's he's ready to go home, so I need to go home too.
far away.
The only thing I thought was, I think the speed limit through Medford is a little higher than what you stated. But check it, I don't know for certain, but I think it is. The other, that wasn't a big issue. The only thing I was concerned about are the bicycle lane being right beside the traffic flow. And that seems, if someone parked, opened the door to get out, where would the bike go? And also, it's the same, back to the same situation that we have coming off of 99 on 4th Street. Who has the right of way, the bicycle or the automobile? That's something.
Going straight, but, okay, pardon? Whoever's going straight.
Yes, but what you're doing.
Sir, sir, okay, thank you for your time.
All right,
Appreciate
you're welcome.
participating.
Thank you for letting me say.
All right, goodbye. See you later. So I think we'll, council, any more questions for staff? We have a vote. Hang tight for just a minute. So someone has to make a motion. I'll do it. Go ahead.
I move to direct staff to prepare preliminary design engineering for option number 2 for the Main Street Lane configuration project with that it includes flashing beacons at each crosswalk, a reduced speed to 20 miles per hour, and an untreated bike lanes from one end of town to the other.
Second.
Okay, just a little bit of discussion. No, ODOT has to work with us on reducing speed. There's times that sometimes you can't go from 35 to 20 right away. There's a graduation of speeds that come down. So I think we have to work with ODOT in order to make that move. We can't say on our own that it's going to be 20 miles per hour. ODOT might say you can go down to 25 miles an hour and then 20 miles per hour. But I think ODOT, Ray can correct me, but ODOT dictates what the speed's going to be, and we can ask that they be reduced, but we can't dictate that they be 20 miles per hour. So we might have to amend the motion, but keep that in mind just for a second while I ask Ray. Was what I said, and Don, correct?
You have to progressively go through it with the speed study, and our last speed study doesn't warrant our speed limit. So we have to go through an appeal process to request it. My own personal opinion is that we have a lot of latitude to force that issue, let me put it that way.
Because we have jurisdiction.
Because we took jurisdiction, that's one issue. The other, I just want a clarification on the crosswalks. When you say you want flashing beacons at all the crosswalks, you're talking about paired flashing beacons at the intersecting streets with Main Street, but not at the other crosswalks, correct?
What do you mean the other crosswalks?
You only want rapid flashing beacons for people that are walking across Main Street. When you say all crosswalks.
Oh, yeah.
Not the north-south crosswalks.
And you want them in every single block, is what I'm asking.
We may not need one at 5th and 6th. You definitely need one at.
Could that decision be made at a later date?
We'll give you design information.
Yeah.
If you can.
That would be best.
So I think the one to strive for 20 miles per hour with ODOT and put rapid flashing beacons at as many crosswalks as.
I've got a 5-minute beat. I'll restate.
Okay, thank you.
I move to direct staff to prepare preliminary design and engineering for option number 2 for the Main Street Lane with an attempted speed. How do you say that? The targeted speed of 20 miles per hour and flashing beacons at each crosswalk where staff sees feasible. And an unobtrusive mic man all the way to town.
Well said.
Thank you. And can I just clarify for the minutes, Councilor Baker, you withdrew your earlier motion.
Yes, oh man.
And the person, I don't recall who seconded the motion.
I did.
And you accept the withdrawal.
I do.
Okay, thank you.
I do. Am I?
Yeah, we don't want any process issues.
So
right? We went
with
through
that said, more discussion? Okay, 6 seconds, roll call please.
Did we get a second on this one?
Yes.
Second.
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 First second. Okay. Counselor Shunt,
Yes.
Counselor Snyder,
Yes.
Counselor,
Yes.
Counselor Westover,
Yes.
Counselor Warren,
Yes.
and Counselor Baker.
Yes.
Hallelujah.
Thank
So
you.
well.
That order.
Now, you guys have some questions for staff?
You can clap now. Okay, let me clap for Church Street.
We can,
No, I mean, just so that you're aware, this is gonna be a design in flux. You know, we showed you one cross section off the graphic. It's not a panacea. We're gonna work with you on some of the design details because it is a little bit unusual arrangement. So I've got a lot of good ideas for the street furniture. We can do things with bollards and wraps on them, make them cute with chains that separate the sidewalk areas. But I also want to work this with what we're getting out of the plaza. You know, specifically for the one unusual situation where we're gonna have sidewalk up against the travel lane. So just a little bit of patience as we work through the details, but I think the current step is to get a good engineering estimate on what we talked about tonight.
we do not need to have anywhere near a final design to go before the planning commission. We simply need to have a configuration. So, I don't know, I mean, which it'll actually be similar to the process we just did with Church Street, where we're looking at a schematic but not a final design, just so that we know exactly what it is they're being asked to approve for each section. It may move slightly within that, but it would be.
We'll make sure that the primary cross-section elements of the streetscape that are necessary to get relief will be in front of the board.
And this is gonna have to go through a variance of planning commission, so the same warning the council applies as with Church Street. You can't speak to the planning commission, you can't have, discussion on a particular issue. It's gonna go through their process and they're gonna have to approve or not approve our decision this evening.
Correct. So
Okay.
operate under the assumption that it will be appealed, not because we hope that, we hope quite the opposite. But if it were to be appealed, we don't want any or more than one of you to have because of bias or conflict issues, because that's a pain. I'd rather not have to go there. And I'm sure Doug would as well.
And it's also, Chris, both of us mentioned that we'd like future agenda is a call-up ability.
That'll be on your next agenda.
Next agenda, okay.
Can I address that? I did bring that up just as an item with our planning commission. And that, since we're already going to be bringing some amendments forward very soon, that would actually be a very easy thing to add to that package. So whatever you decide, if you decide, it's not difficult.
But with that, maybe the other one's would the call-up provision go in the land use code, or would it go in the council rules and procedures? I'm not sure exactly.
The examples I've found thus far were listed with the appeal procedures in the development code or equivalent.
So you're comfortable overrule
To call up and review a planning commission decision.
We like appeal, we appeal.
Well, essentially, and Dave, maybe you thought you may have found some different examples. Most of the examples I found simply required a council motion. So it's not really a formal appeal necessarily. It's, we'd like to hear this before this body.
Exactly.
And that was all that was required. And maybe you have different.
Well, I'd have to look at your land development ordinance for that particular, you don't have anything in there with respect to appeal to the city council.
By the council.
Well, why don't we let staff kind of hash that out?
Let me
Sure. Okay, But we've only got the full minute before 9 o'clock, might have to extend. We have one more item of business. Okay, great, thank you. Thanks. Right, thanks for coming, guys. So we're
Thanks
down.
for having us.
So we're down to, some manager comments, attorney comments.
I'll be brief. A couple of things that I mentioned in department update. One, we have to raise to do a postcard insert in for every shopper, so one per shopper for a month. And my theory was twofold on this. The first is that pretty much everybody in Phoenix goes into Raise at least once a month, if not more often. And we have on our website a subscription service. And you can subscribe for council agendas, planning commission agendas, newsletters, news releases. I think it's a great way for people to stay informed and engage with city government. Just subscribe to the website, and I think Kimberly told me we only have 10 people subscribed, so it'd be nice to bring that number up. Anyway, this is the postcard, and I give all the credit to Kimberly to put this together, and so this will start going into shopping bags at Ray's Food Place. It is double-sided, so on one side is for people to subscribe to the website, and the other side is a plug for people to volunteer, particularly on the boards and commissions where we have vacancies.
If I can get this in digital format, I'll throw the newsletter also.
This is nice. Phoenix page would be nice to get on there.
The
Thank you for putting this together. This is nice.
The final product will be much nicer, a printing company's doing it at a much cheaper cost.
The other thing I wanted to mention, I pointed out in the department update, I think we can get the budget done in one meeting. If you're willing to have a single 3-hour meeting in this meeting. Last year, as I said, we had 2 meetings, but it was a total of 3 hours of meeting time. And I recall thinking at the end of the second meeting that we could have done this in one night and just had it wrapped up. So I put it to the council, would you be willing to have a single 3-hour meeting on May 8th?
Speaking of Fury and Phoenix.
You know, the Fury budget is so simple, but I can't imagine it's going to take that much time.
Wait, speaking of doing both in the same night?
Yes.
Okay. I'm always in favor of trying, and if it doesn't happen, then we'll do another session. But
Pain once, a pain twice. Yeah, rip that Band-Aid out.
I'm down and dirty.
Anybody not want to do that?
I have a question. Do we have any, would that happen during a regular occurring city council meeting or
No.
outside?
The budget meeting is set for May 8th, which actually is the day after your city council meeting. So you'd be meeting 2 nights in a row.
Okay. So that would be a Tuesday night?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's it.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, we do have to.
Did you want me to?
Oh, go. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I do. I think the last time.
My bad. I apologize.
Last I left you, I was going to work on the electronic nuisance ordinance. I in fact have gotten 2 different ordinances put together since last time. And I'm having one looked over by another attorney that I work with on this, and just to kind of flesh out some ideas of mine. But essentially, one would be utilizing a statute that actually exists for nuisances, and it would be an amendment to that statute so that we would use it as our own with our own amendments to it. And I'm kind of seeing how that might work. It has a process that's involved in it. It also allows for citizens to use it for if they are personally affected by a nuisance. There's some kind of rules around it, but that might be one. Or there's also another ordinance that is a small city, a little smaller than, I think we're probably a little smaller than Dundee, a little smaller than Phoenix, but at the same time, a much simpler ordinance than the one that was suggested by City of Medford, for the City of Medford's one, which has a lot of process in it, probably requires staffing and all that type of stuff, whereas this one, and so it's either a small package one that another city uses or my own design. So anyway, I don't want to get into it other than to say that I've kind of promised our neighbors that I would get something started, and I have, and at least I've got 2 things started.
Hey, let them know.
Thank you.
Okay.
Working on it.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna be gone this next week, and so I won't be able to get at it, but I will as soon as I get back.
Okay, great.
Right.
I need to have a quick executive session, so we're probably gonna have to extend. So I'll do my quick mayor's comment. Shops at 24 are having a grand opening, 21st, wasn't that next Saturday?
Shop's 24.
I mean, sorry,
Next 24
the storage.
To Bob, but it's an all-day event. or
And
something.
I'll send everybody else information, but it is next Saturday, right?
Saturday.
Oh,
This
this coming Saturday. Okay, I'll send notifications to everybody, for next events. Welcome.
Great, I'm just looking up the date for our next CPAC meeting, which I believe is on, Monday, May 7th. I think it's in the packet, sorry. At our last meeting, we discussed that we adopted some goals that we would like to see for our economic element of the comprehensive plan. I also wanted to add that I am planning to attend the planning forum that's happening on May 9th. I would encourage other folks to go if you want to. It's an opportunity to learn more about how planning operates and what's the role of counselors and what's the role of planning commissioners. So I touched base with Evan about that. I think he sent out a notification, but I would really encourage other folks to go. I think it's something we could all brush up on. And lastly, I wanted to make a comment that these last couple of transportation conversations have taken up a lot of energy, and I think that one of the things that we could really use is a clear and consistent vision for Phoenix. And, right now, we are in need of really like amending a lot of our planning documents, because right now we're not really doing what's in our planning documents. We're not doing what's in the comprehensive plan. We're not doing a lot of that, and so I think that by continuing to ask for variances for road issues, not only are we not having a consistent process, so I wonder about Pine Street, right? So we just did Church Street, but what happens when we do Pine Street? So I think it's really important that if we want consistency, we have to update our TSP, which and our, or potentially our transportation element, because we need a clear, consistent process and vision, and I think being on the same page will help us save a lot of time, and I also think it will be really good for staff. I feel like our staff has been really patient and incredible and putting it together and kind of going out of their way to put this together, but I think it's up to us to do our part too and make sure that we have a shared vision and that we're implementing it consistently. So, thanks. Oh, last thing is I'm also going to serve on the MPO budget committee.
So we can make a motion for us to extend tonight. I don't think it takes till 9:30, but just motion to extend to 9:30.
I make a motion to extend to 9:30.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great, thank you very much.
I'm done.
But by charter, we get to extend the meeting at 9 o'clock to 9:30 to 9:30 to 10. We're covered. Okay, good, sir.
Just one thing, we got the biannual Bear Creek Stewardship event this Saturday. It's taking place at Blue Heron Park. It begins at 9 a.m. We're going to run from 9 to noon. We're going to be cleaning up a bunch of trash. Ray and I just did a big long walk down there, and there's a lot of trash this year. And we're also going to be tackling some blackberry issues. If anyone wants to get involved or get some blackberries down, there's going to be plenty out there. So once again, this Saturday, 21st, Blue Heron Park, 9 a.m. And you can sign up online at bearcreekstewards.org, or you can just sign up today showing up.
I'll tell a little story, and I'll circle back to our city. I recently went to Phoenix, Arizona for a vacation, and when I was looking for places to eat, I went to TripAdvisor, and I said, where are the top 5 restaurants and the top 2 barbecue and the top 2 steaks or whatever. What I found was the #1 restaurant by TripAdvisor for barbecue is also #1 for all of the city of 2,100 plus restaurants. So one day we skipped lunch and thought we'll go to the barbecue place about 3:40 or 3:50 and have an early dinner. We get there and we find out that everything on the board is covered up because they're sold out except for one kind of food. we would sit down, they hold the restaurant open for us because it closes at 4. So the owner comes over and talks to me, and I said, how do you get so popular? How can you be number one? He said, well, a couple of years ago, we opened up and hardly had any customers. And then a critic from the newspaper came, and he was there, wrote us up, and since then, we have a 2-hour wait in our parking lot when we open up at 11, and we sell out every day. So to circle back to here, I know that happened at Essen not too long ago. And recently, when I've been going there, they've had a lot of customers in there. So if someone can somehow get good critiques, maybe it'll draw more people, because I'm seeing a positive result in Essen. But in Phoenix, it bumps them from being just a regular old place open from 11 to 4 to turn away business. That's how powerful that becomes. Well, that's all I have.
Thank you. How do you follow that?
Well, not very well. It's okay. It's okay. We have the Academy Chamber Board meeting on the 18th. On May 8th, we have the next Breeders' meeting's going to be at Ray's, Ray's Market. And then on May 19th, we have the upcoming citywide yard sale. Breeders' meeting was well attended. We had it at the counseling center, Phoenix Counseling Center. And so actually there was no seats available. It was very well attended. So it was very nice.
Counselor Sharp?
I have nothing to declare.
Okay, next. I appreciate it.
I don't either, except, just to say thanks to staff again, you know, it's such a great job through all this and through the Church Street, and, we're very fortunate to have you all and everyone.
So I'm gonna move the council meeting to executive session, which means everyone has to get out. Well, thank you guys for coming, appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks,
Okay,
John.
thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, Glenn.